thank God for His protection throughout the year. And I
I'd like to go ahead and get started with our Bible class this morning. You guys in the foyer want to come on in. We'll get started with our Bible class this morning. Thanks for being here. We have a special guest with us this morning for our Bible class period. Our brother Evan Todachine is here from Mesa, Arizona, in the Phoenix area. And he's going to be speaking to us specifically in our Bible class about the Native American outreach that's taking place in Arizona. So if you would please give Evan your attention while he speaks to us about this great work that he's doing. Evan?
Testing, testing. Okay, there we go. Good morning. You want to learn how to say good morning in Navajo? 2 words. Ya'at'e. Abene. That means good morning. It is good. It is good that we're here, and it's good that God has given us another beautiful day. And I'm thankful for the eldership and the missions committee to bring me on in to report a little bit about what all's going on. And some of us may not be as familiar with the Native American outreach. I think that's because I've only been here once before, several years ago. In a way, it seems like 10 years ago. In another way, it seems like it was several months ago. I think COVID kind of jumbled our ability to perceive time in the past and all of that jazz. But I'm thankful to be here and hopefully be able to give to you a little bit of information and especially try to encourage this congregation, because certainly the mission field is right out our church doors, right? It is, that's where it is. It's not just in a foreign country. It's not in the Native American communities. It's your next door neighbor. It's the cashier at the gas pump. It's the supermarket person that gathers the carts. It's people who do not know God. That's our mission field. And so hopefully this will encourage you to do some mission work yourself in whatever capacity that is. Nothing wants to work for me this morning. Okay, so there's our family. This is I think I may have instructed the kind of the more outdated PowerPoint. That's okay. It still has familiar slides on there. But this is our family, the Todachine family. We've since added one more. This is when we graduated from Bear Valley in 2017. So my beautiful wife, Crystal, I think they're watching right now. It's 2 hours. We still got we're 2 hours previous in Arizona now, so I think it's 7:30, but if she's up, she's watching. So we've got Crystal, my beautiful bride. We've got Faith, who is now 7. And then we've got Kenley, who is 5. And now we've since added Ramey. Ramey just turned 3. So 3 beautiful girls. We work with a family, the Austin family. This is Josh Austin. Josh is what we call an albino Navajo. He's a white guy, but was born and raised on the reservation. His parents were one of the earliest missionary teams to come out of Sunset in the early 70s. And so Josh and his beautiful bride, Divine, they have been a part of the native work for probably 15 or so years. So Josh was born and raised in my hometown, Kayenta, and his family has a great reputation amongst the Navajo people. After graduating high school, he went on to the University of Denver to play basketball, and that's when he attended Bear Valley, and he began his pursuit of becoming a minister, came back to Kayenta, my hometown, and kind of revamped the church that had died several years before he got back there. Here's an idea of how old this photo is. Their oldest right there, Aaliyah, just is a senior in high school, so she'll be graduating in a few months. So, man, I need to update this slide. But this is one that I found that had all of them together. So we're so thankful to work with not only a great brother in Christ and his family, but Josh is ultimately the guy that God used to convert me. And I'll talk a little bit about how that happened. And so for those who may not be familiar, the Navajo Reservation is really kind of our main effort. This is where the work begins. It kind of revolves around this reservation. But just to give you an insight of how large the reservation is, it really, this map is hard to tell, but it does occupy 4 of the states in the Four Corners area. So northeast Arizona, the actual size of the Navajo Reservation is actually larger than the state of West Virginia. And so if you think about the state of West Virginia and how much we're lacking the Lord's church, this is a map that shows all of those arrows are where the Lord's church is located on the reservation. But since this also, 2 congregations have closed their doors and 1 has opened. And so we've got 8 congregations in an area that's larger than the state of West Virginia. Our story real quickly begins after I graduated from high school. Myself and Crystal moved down to Phoenix, and that's where we began to go to school. I had played some baseball there, and I grew up traditional, and that's my dad's father he conducts ceremonies. I grew up going to peyote meetings and sitting in a teepee throughout the night and listening to the medicine man sing songs, and that was my upbringing. That was my worldview. It's how I was taught and raised, and a lot of great things that come about from that. A lot of things I still try to implement into my life today. But leaving that and going down to college, I had studied engineering, and so the head of the science and the math department is Lawrence Krauss at Arizona State. Lawrence Krauss is one of the leading physicists in the world and is a strong atheist, a devout atheist. Well, you can imagine not even just college level now, our children's public schools are pushing this idea of evolution and time, chance, and matter. And so I come from a background of high spiritual teaching, and then you come to a college and they're telling you that there is no higher God, there is no higher being, that we're all here, we're all basically stardust that happened by chance over millions of years. And so I'm being fed that, and Josh at the time moves down from Kayenta to Phoenix and says, "Hey, Evan," because he knows my family, "we're going to start a church here in the Phoenix area. Would you like to study the Bible?" And so I'm like, well, I'm still going to ceremonies. I'm learning about how there is no God. We might as well bring the Bible into it too. Let's just get it all out there. And so for about a year, we studied every single week for about a year, and it was finally time for us to make that decision, and everything fell in line, and I was talking to Marion and Miss Gina as they picked me up from the airport yesterday about how out of all of the worldviews that I've been able to think about and think through and notice and sit down and analyze, it was very obvious to me which one was rational, which one made sense. But not only made sense, which worldview invited me to question. God says, test all things, hold fast to what is true. that invitation to go ahead, seek me and find me, because I'm here and God wants to be made known. And that was something that was a little different from my upbringing, because the teaching for the Navajo, there's a lot of teachings, and it's a very taboo anchored religion. It's you don't do things because you don't want a negative outcome, sort of similar to karma. And so you find yourself trying to live that life looking backwards, actually, because you notice how many times you drop the ball, and you notice how many times you mess up, and you're just, man, I can't get things right, and the Creator always seems so distant, and so I've got to get cedar and herbs and peyote and things of this world to help my relationship with the Creator. So He always seems so distant. But then I come to the Bible and notice that God says, you know, when you come to Christ and you're clothed with Christ, He says, I live in you now. And all of these things are so foreign to me, and anytime you see the conversion of a Native American, it is something that just so, it can't be true. It's so good. It's so amazing. And so it took a year for me to finally commit, and soon before Josh and I started studying, Crystal and I down in Phoenix, where we had our first child. His name was Chase, and born, I can't forget his birthday, 10, 11, 12, as he made it easy on me. So he was born. Things were going great. And then in October of 2014, Crystal and I said, okay, we're ready. Let's commit. And we went to Josh's pool. This is one of our baptistries. Salt River is Josh's pool. And so Josh baptized me. I turned around and baptized my girlfriend at the time, Crystal. Things were going great. We were on track spiritually. We were where we wanted to be. And now I get to raise my son. And I've come out of a religion that I see some good. I see some things that don't line up with truth. And things were great. And that's what life is, right? Life is always great. Never any bad. Well, 3 months later, Chase would contract bacterial meningitis. And he was taken within a week. And so, mysteriously, don't know how he contracted meningitis, but within a week he was pronounced brain dead. And so 3 months into our Christian walk, after coming out of a worldview where we saw the flaw and we saw the need to change, and you come to Christ and you say, okay, God, I'm ready to live for you, let's do this. And then something like this happens. And so, how do you work through that? You know, this was really our faith tester. You know, it was early on, and by God's grace and by God's mercy, His truth was there, His promises that were foundational for us to recommit to say, do I really believe in this thing called Christianity? Because a lot of me wanted to go back to my old belief. That was comfortable, and we had our ceremonies, and we had our prayers, and we had our way of dealing with loss and grief. And so there was so much to want to go back to that, but I'm so thankful for those who God had placed around us that we were able to cling on to, and that's when we really had to decide for ourselves, is this really something we want to commit to? Well, I remember sitting probably several weeks after Chase's death, sitting in Josh's his Honda Pilot and just crying my eyeballs out, but I knew based off my personality that in order for us to stay faithful, we had to be all in. There's no way we could have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and said, what's this thing, what can we do to really just fully immerse ourselves into the Lord and His work? And so we decided to go to Bear Valley. And the way in which God had blessed the whole situation with Chase, again, as new Christians, it was very, very new to our family and how we were going to deal with this death, but just being able to lean on God and to let Him to supply us with words, and being able to speak to family about having peace and joy, it was something, it was indescribable. Of I'm hurting, I'm numb, but I'm okay. We're okay, and we know that in the grand scheme of things, ultimately our child is where we would have wanted him to be anyway, however amount of time God gave him to live. And so from very early on, as young adults, we were forced to really take a grasp and try to zoom out and try to view life in big picture. And so one of the ways that God had blessed that is through the way in which Chase's death was dealt with, and again, all through God's giving all glory to God, we know of 11 people that came to the Lord because of the death of Chase. And so being able to tell them what we understood and what we were thinking through and what we were feeling, we're able to reach others. And so in the middle up at the top, that's Crystal's younger sister, Brianna. And Crystal, again, is full Navajo, so am I. Her boyfriend, DeCoven, who's half black and half Navajo, I think DeCoven may be leading our opening prayer at Salt River this morning. And so they've been faithful. They became Christians and have been a great part of the work there at Salt River for many years. And so just seeing how God can turn something bad and make good out of it. The sermon this morning is going to be based on Romans 8:28, that God works all things together for good for those who love Him. Well, how does that work? You know, I've been told the different analogies about that, and one is that of a fruit salad. If anybody likes fruit salad here, you take a little bit of everything, right? There's no real direct recipe for fruit salad. It's really whatever you got and throw in a little bit of this and that, but you put it all together and it's a masterpiece. You know, and I believe that that was one analogy given to me of if you give your situation to God, He can make good out of it. Amen? He can make good out of it. And only He can do something like that out of a tragedy. And so that's what we witnessed firsthand and really got ourselves going. And so we went to Bear Valley in 2015 and really survived. People ask me if you graduated from Bear Valley. Oh, I survived Bear Valley. That was it. It was so new because we had been Christians less than a year. And being able to work through that, it was an amazing experience. And right on into full-time work as soon as we got out of Bear Valley. But again, a few statistics about how we want to influence this great population. So the Navajo Reservation has, and this is because of COVID, it's actually, we've noticed that the population is more like 500,000 for the Navajo people, which makes the Navajo the largest tribe in America, surpassing that of the Cherokee. And so the reservation for the Navajo covers about 27,000 square miles. But what's interesting also is you see that white patch in the middle of the reservation here. That's actually the Hopi Reservation located inside the Navajo Reservation. And so that's another area that we've been able to target since our ministry started. When you think about reservation life, if anybody's been on a reservation, you noticed right away how the living conditions are very bad. And you think about poverty rate's about 60% on the Navajo Reservation, and I would probably say that that's similar in other reservations and other areas, and possibly worse in other areas. The unemployment rate is actually 65%, and I imagine over the last year or so with COVID, it's probably even increased more than that. And so you have a high poverty rate. You don't have anywhere in which you can pursue careers or get a job. And what's the results of that? You know, what's the result of the inability to see goodness around you in life, especially if Christ is not in the picture? Well, one of the results of that is a high suicide rate. You know, in our young ones, in our teens on the Native American land, the suicide rate can be anywhere from 4 to 5 times the national average. And you think about why that is. Why is taking your life an actual option on the table for you? Well, if I don't know about the hope and the peace and the joy that I find in Christ, and I'm just viewing this world in a physical way, though they're spiritual people, then to forego all of the pain and all of the struggle for somebody without God in the picture, that makes sense. But that's the problem, is it shouldn't make sense because Christ should always be in the picture. And that's kind of our effort, is that's one of the main issues with the Indian communities. But I'll tell you what, it doesn't mean that natives aren't looking. If you remember in Acts chapter 17, when Paul goes into Athens and he goes to Mars Hill and he looks around and you notice he says, you know, I can tell you guys are a very religious people. I can tell you're spiritual. You know why? Because you got so many of these idols set up, and you even have one that's unnamed just in case you forget about what the name is for that God. So you said, okay, if we forgot any gods out there, here's one more for you. And he makes that observation and says, let me start where you are, and begin to talk about this unknown God, which we know as Yahweh. And that's exactly where Native Americans are, is you're not dealing with atheists. You're not having to build an argument for a higher moral agency or why we have the ability to decipher between right and wrong. They know there's something bigger and greater out there that created us. It's just a matter of plugging in the pieces. And so that's kind of what the evangelism is about. And so we asked ourselves, what's the greatest way, the most effective way to reach Native Americans? Because just to give you an idea, how big the Navajo Reservation is, that's just one tribe. That's just one reservation. There's 630 federally recognized tribes in America. 330 of those have land that we would call reservations. Out of the 330 reservations, guess how many have the Lord's church on them? We know of less than 10. Through everybody we know, all of our resources, all of people we network with in the brotherhood, out of the 330 reservations in America, less than 10 have the Lord's church on them. Well, you would say, man, well, that's because, we haven't noticed the need, right? And that's partly the reason for why we do what we do, is if I could just raise awareness, if we could just talk and raise awareness about the work, we can look about in our own areas. I mean, I passed the casino to get here. I know there's natives in this area. It said Cherokee Casino there, and I'm like, okay, I was about to ask Marion to drop me off. I'm just going to walk around and see who I can find. But, just to be a little bit more aware, just to be a little bit more conscious about maybe these areas that may be just right around us. And so where can we work that would be the most efficient? Well, after looking at all possible resources and opportunities, Josh had said that he looked at Phoenix, and what he found out was Phoenix had over 130,000 Native Americans, not just Navajo, but Hopi, Pima, White Mountain Apache, San Carlos Apache, Gila River, Yaqui, the list goes on. 130,000 Native Americans. This is the largest concentrated area in all of America for Native Americans and where they live. And so I was explaining this to Gina and Marion, but if you're a Native American and you're born and raised on the reservation and you have that drive and you want to do something with your life and you want to become somebody, you're not going to live on the reservation forever, because you've got to get trained. You've got to go to school. And so the natives kind of weed themselves out in a way. For those who want to do something with their life, they're going to get the scholarships, they're going to apply to schools, and they're going to leave the res, go to Phoenix, because that's the closest city. And they're going to get trained, and they're going to develop those skills in order to one day go back and help their communities. That's the plan. Well, instead of working directly on the reservations, why don't we maybe work in Phoenix, where there's the highest concentrated area of Native Americans? In this way, the natives in which we're reaching have already kind of weeded themselves out, and now we're reaching natives that have, to some degree, more drive, more will, more ability, more willingness, and that's the plan here. And so the Salt River congregation began, and it was birthed in 2014. Crystal and I were of which one of the first converts. And so when you think about, and I'll talk about this at length in the sermon, but just to give you an idea of how large we are, in 2019, pre-COVID, is probably the highest that we've been since the church began in 2014, but about 90 folks was our average Sunday morning. We have a fairly high return rate Wednesday nights, 55, but thinking about the influence of COVID, and I'll talk about why, as of February, we have about 50 of last year, this is 2021, because of COVID, it dropped dramatically, and I'm sure this is kind of similar across the board with all of our congregations. But we did have a dip throughout COVID, and I think a week ago, Easter Sunday, I think we had our attendance was 75. So we're climbing, we're getting pretty close to our pre-COVID numbers, and we're thankful for that. But here are a few pictures of some baptisms. The picture on the left there, we are baptizing a brother from the Pima community. And so Josh and I will go into the Pima Salt River community, and we work and we do Bible studies in the prison there. We work with a drug and rehab facility center, and we're kind of just in and out in the community. Well, we rent a space in a strip mall, and that's where we meet. Well, we don't have a baptistry there, and so that's why I said the pool is one of our 2 baptistries. The second one is a horse trough that we carry around, Josh's SUV or my pickup truck. We haul it around with us. And so we'll be like, okay, Josh, I've got to study with so-and-so on the res. I'm on this side. And he says, okay, I'm finishing up the prison ministry. I have the baptistry with me. So if you need it, let me know. And so as soon as we're done, and maybe there's somebody that's ready to be baptized, we'll call him and say, okay, let's meet at Justin's house. Justin's a member he passed away at the end of last year, but his home is where we would meet, because we would call him and say, Justin, start the water. And he'd go outside, and he was about 70 years old. He'd go outside, turn on his faucet, and we'd drop the baptistry or the horse trough off, and he'd start filling it. It takes 36 minutes to get it to the right amount. And so we text everybody and say, hey, there's going to be a baptism. Go to the res. Here are the cross streets. And everybody would be there. We'd meet in front of the yard of Justin. And as people are driving by, they're doing this. There's just a clump of people. We're filling up a horse trough, and somebody's inside of it. And the whole congregation, we'd meet there, sing songs, and we'd baptize them, and everybody gives them a giant hug, and there they begin their spiritual walk. And, of course, the other one is in the back of Josh's pool. And so, interesting. We enjoy it. So, not having baptistry is not all that bad. It makes things more fun. You get stories to tell and things like that. Here are 2 of our recent converts. You have Carrie Watchman on the left. She is Navajo. And then you have Marie, who on the right, and she was baptized into the Salt River, which is where we get our name for the congregation. And she is Salt River Pima. And so God is continuing to bless us with truth seekers, and we're rewarded. Here's a few pictures of the youth. So one of the things that I try to help out with and take on is the youth ministry. So we've got a few pizza parties. We went out to play at a place nearby, and so a lot of great times with them. As far as our outreach ministries go, we meet every Thursday and invite a community Bible study that I call Recharge, and so we're just finishing up the book of Acts, and so that's always a great in-depth study. And another thing that we do, like I said, is we work with the Journey to Recovery, which is a program for the Salt River Indian community. And so we go in. This is Justin on the right. He's the guy that turns on the faucet for us. But he's a brother. He's since gone on to receive his crown. In the middle is a guy by the name of Donald Centeo. They're both Salt River Pima. And so I go in and we conduct Bible studies in this halfway house. It's a good time. We were blessed many times. Here's Josh teaching at one of those times that we were meeting. And as really what I want the majority of the time, how long do I have? 10, about 10 after. Okay, about 10 minutes. So with COVID-19, and I'll discuss this more at length, but I don't know, did anybody hear about COVID and how it affected the Native communities? It made headlines in several news stations. Well, the Native Americans, the population in America was really, in several ways, the hardest hit area of all of our country. And you look at the increase of deaths, this is 3 months into COVID, and we were already reaching over 6,000 deaths. It really turned the Native communities upside down. Here are 2 other articles that I pulled. On the left, if the 270,000 square mile Navajo Nation were a state, it would have the second highest rate of COVID-19 infection in the country, behind only New York. 2 weeks later, we would become the highest. On the right, it talks about how it's ravaging through the reservations. Really 3 reasons as to why COVID hit us so hard. Number one, only a third of all homes on the reservation have running water and electricity. In 2022, if you can believe that, only 1/3 of all homes have both running water and electricity. And so if one of the basic ways to stay clean and practice safe sanitary, washing yourself, if this is what has to last my family for a month, literally this is what a lot of families do, is they'll fill that up, and that is to be their water that they use every single month until they get the next time to fill up in town and fill up their water barrel here. And so if this is the only water that I have, I can't exactly wash my hands every 10 minutes. Another thing, too, is very similar to the Hispanic community. Native Americans are multi-generational dwellers. That means that we live together with grandma, grandpa, and the grandkids. All of us live together, but the homes in which we live in are not roomed. They don't have separate rooms. In the back of these folks here, you have the native hogan, right? It's just one big, giant living area. And so if somebody contracts COVID-19 and they go home, they can't exactly isolate. They're around everybody. And so the infection rate grew tremendously. And so as a result, we see here are several stations. The last administration, the Trump administration, did a tremendous job, because what he did is he dispatched the National Guard, and the National Guard came in and set up a lot of these makeshift facilities in which they were giving the vaccine out and treating. And so I'm very thankful for that. But if you look, you see the line of vehicles just stretching out here, and this is very common. So on the reservation, on the Navajo Reservation at least, there's only 4 hospitals, just 4 hospitals, and the rest would be tiny little clinics. And so the need to address this pandemic, it was pretty much impossible for them. And so they cut off all of the need to provide assistance for other areas that needed help, like those who had diabetes, those who needed insulin, those who had surgeries coming up. Basically, everything but COVID was kind of put to the back burner. But we were one of the first to receive the vaccine and begin to give that to the communities. But as a result, of course, you can't just sit there and watch while things are going on. And Salt River tried to do our best, and so we game planned and brainstormed and said, what could we do? Well, the Native American communities, the Navajo being one of them, each are sovereign nations. They're sovereign entities. So we can go about our business how we see fit, as determining our laws, as determining our how we utilize our money and our revenue. And what the Navajo Nation decided to do was to implement a 6 to 8 month long hard lockdown, which we would all recognize as a stay-at-home order. And it was so strict that if you were caught outside driving around, out and about, if you did not have to be, if you were not an essential worker, it was 30 days in jail or a $1,000 fine. Now keep in mind, the majority of homes, majority of people do not have running water or electricity. And so by the time fall came about, that's the time that everybody that doesn't have electricity goes out and hauls wood to burn for the winter months to stay warm. Well, during this time, the stay-at-home order was enforced. So a lot of these folks in rural areas could not go out and collect for themselves wood and coal to burn to keep themselves warm during the winter months, let alone go out to gather supplies. And we all remember the toilet paper shortage and all of these. It was virtually, you couldn't get it anywhere. And so what Salt River did is we took up donations. We had, I think, a 3-piece article put into the Christian Chronicle, and we're good friends with Eric Triggersgaard, who oversees that work, the Christian Chronicle. But after talking about how hard the COVID struck the Native American communities, he also put in there, if you would like to send funds, you feel free to do so. And he put our address in there. I don't think we asked for that. He just put that in there. Well, would you believe that we received over $40,000 from the Brotherhood worldwide? We were receiving checks after checks after checks, donations. And so we just turned that around, and we would go out and buy supplies. I remember like every week we would all go out to the nearest Sam's Club or Costco and kind of just rub elbows with folks and say, we need this more. This is going to the Native communities. But we would buy all of those things, bring it back to the building, and multiple times throughout the week we would stay and package them up in boxes. Well, this allowed us to go into reservations that we were not allowed to go on beforehand. These two pictures are of the White Mountain Apache Reservation, which is about 3 hours east of Phoenix. Well, we've tried to evangelize here before COVID. They wouldn't have us. There were already so many denominations, they were like, we've got enough. Well, COVID struck and they needed supplies. They're a rural reservation. Now we were granted access to go onto the reservation. And so we went, and I took a handful of us, and here we are, and we got all of these bags lined up, and we stapled tracts and Bible correspondence studies and our information because we live stream. And so this was handed out. Over 200 folks came, and we were able to serve them with these goods and the spiritual food as well. And we also used the money that we had left over, and I would go back to the reservation, and Josh would, and we would purchase wood from people who go, and a lot of members who don't have jobs. This is what they do to earn a living, is they'll go out and cut the wood, chop it up, and sell it by the road, and maybe something similar here, but people would come and buy it, and that's how that family made a living. Well, we would go, take money, and we would just buy loads and loads of them. Thankfully, Crystal was like, well, what if you get pulled over? What if a police officer comes? I said, well, I can't guarantee that I won't be in jail, but I'm going to go anyway. And I'm going to pull out our church card as if that's my get out of jail free card. But thankfully, nothing ever happened. But we bought loads and loads of wood, and we delivered to these elderly, the beautiful grandmas. Look how beautiful those faces are. And we would deliver. The Robinson and Center Church of Christ in Conway purchases bulk loads of Bibles for us. And so we, as a result, will take these Bibles with us and have studies and pray and that kind of thing. So here's a few more pictures of that. I don't want to steal too much of my thunder because I'll talk about this at length. But being able to visit a small congregation. And, there's been a lot of bad that have come about because of COVID and all of that. And I know our hearts were here because we understood, and we knew of several members here who struggled with that by contracting that virus. But the good that I think that came about was it revealed, and I was talking to Gina about this, it revealed the faith that was inside of us all. For those who had genuine faith and have genuine commitment to God, did this not strengthen us? Did this not cause us to rely more on God and less on ourselves? As a result, we acknowledge that God is able to do all things, above all, anything we can imagine. But it also revealed those who did not have a genuine faith, who were kind of just doing things just to do it, who were kind of just in the motion. So I believe that this revealed that, and sure, we lost some members, some of which we probably will never see again, but for Salt River, these and a few others that weren't here for this picture were the Christians that really were rock solid during all of this. And so you think about what God can do through you. If you give him the situation, without a doubt, he can bring good out of it. Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. And so I'm thankful for this group. They'll be meeting together in several minutes. Just a few here, I guess a few notes. With Salt River, if we have everybody present, we can have up to 15 tribes represented in our congregation. 15 tribes. 100 years ago, somebody's dying if 15 of us get together. Right? But how does that happen? How do you have, we've got white, black, we've got Filipino, we've got every color of the rainbow, and, everybody's there. But how does that happen? I think when you stress the importance of we are just devoted to Christ and His mission, regardless of background, regardless of political view, regardless of outlook, if your goal is Christ and to glorify Him, can we not be all united? We ought to, right? Okay, well, I think I'm out of time. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Thank you all so much. I don't know if we have time for maybe a question or two, but if we're ready to go, we can. Mike, what do you think? Yeah? Let's get maybe 2 questions. Any thoughts about the work? Any questions come up in your mind? No question is dumb. Believe me, that's fine.
About casinos, does the money that they make, does it filter into the reservation, or is it kind of, hierarchy, they get it and nothing goes into the reservation? How does that work?
Right, so with each tribe being its own sovereign nation, they can choose what they do with the revenue, which is why the majority of reservations actually don't have any revenue like that. The majority of reservations do not have casinos. But those who choose to have a casino, that's revenue for the tribe, and they can allocate that however they see. I think the majority of what I'm familiar with is they'll take some of that revenue and they'll distribute amongst the actual tribal members. And for the Navajo, we have a casino. I think we have 2 casinos, but you see how large we are. We don't see any of that because we're just too big. But for the smaller tribes, I can see how they'll probably have a monthly check come in from the tribe and things like that. The Salt River Pima Reservation, they take care of their tribal members. They do a great job offering programs, assistance. They do a tremendous job. They make the Navajo Nation look really bad, actually. But yeah, it'll start at the top, and then they'll decide what to do with that money. Just like our government, the federal government decides, well, is this going to infrastructure? Is this going to programs? So they'll kind of decide on that. So, yes, sir.
So can you maybe you may not be able to do this briefly, but I'm just curious what the deity is in the Navajo tribe. Is it, I think we're familiar with seeing movies and so forth.
Yeah.
Where it's nature and so forth like that. Can you kind of dive into that?
Yeah. Well, I'll speak for the Navajo because not every tribe believes the same thing. Not every tribe believes in the same gods. But for the Navajo, and I suppose there are others similar to us, we believe in a creator. We believe in one being that created the universe. We believe in a spirit, which we call the Great Spirit. And this spirit is everywhere. There's a lot of with the Navajo, there's a lot of similarity to how we would describe the Trinity. So we believe in the Creator, we believe in the Spirit, a Great Spirit, and how He works, but we also believe in what we would call holy people. And these are deities that, really these are the deities that live in and with us. We can't see them, but they're there, and they kind of help implement the Creator's plan with us. So these are the folks we pray to. We pray to the many holy people, but we also believe that there's spirit in everything, right? So that kind of goes back to that spiritism, that you're going to pray to the mountains, you're going to pray to the sky, you're going to pray to the earth, you're going to pray to the 4 directions, because there's deity in all of that. So that generally, in a nutshell, that's kind of what we believe in. So, but if you bring up the God and say you need to convert to Christianity and the God of the Bible, they say, oh yeah, we all worship that God. We just do it differently. I beg to differ with that, but that's what their response is. So, all right, I believe that bell was time. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.